JJ the CPA here. Warning, adult content. If you're a child, don't listen. But let me tell you a story, outrageous tax story, but it's a great example of how if you take the tax law and you apply it properly, you can take a situation like this and create a tax favorable tax deduction. All starts with a female that is in the adult entertainment industry, and she decides to get her breasts enlarged. Now, she wrote that off, and in fact, under Code Section 179, where she could just write it off all in 1 year. So, being out in Hollywood and being an adult entertainer, this was not done on the cheap. So this is a very expensive deduction. It wasn't taken as a medical deduction because it was not medically necessary. This would be something that's elected, so it's not a medical deduction. And even if it was considered necessary, it would be limited to 7.5% of your income. So this CPA that was working with this client found a way to get a full deduction even though it was not medically necessary and it was not subject to any phase out. And the reason for that is that there's Code Section 162, which you don't care about code sections, but why that code section is important is that there's two requirements for something to be a business expense deductible for tax purposes. Number one, it has to be ordinary and necessary for your business. Number two, you need to have the intent of incurring that expense for business purposes. So you take this adult entertainer, and when she decided to get her breasts enlarged, she determined that this was necessary for her and her industry. Necessary for boosting revenue, selling more, collecting more, whatever you want to call it, but it was considered necessary in her industry to do this. And her intent was only to do it for business purposes. So when she's visiting with her CPA and they're coming up with, okay, here are the circumstances, here is the law, how do we apply them, which they had done, and this is something that was challenged by the IRS. It went to court, and the taxpayer prevailed because she and her CPA were able to show that they met the requirements of Code Section 162, that it was necessary for a business, and then she had the intent for business purposes. So, not necessarily going to be the situation for you. I doubt you're going to want to go into the adult industry just so that you would be able to write off an enlargement to your chest. But this is a great example of how the tax law is not necessarily black and white. It is taking the circumstances that you have, applying the law properly to come up with what I would call an outrageous tax deduction. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in, and if you love my video, if you like my video even, if you would subscribe, I would so appreciate it. Right down below, click subscribe. And then don't you forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. Get the